You are often called lazy. You avoid tasks that feel pointless. You think more than you act, but psychology suggests something uncomfortable. Many traits labeled laziness repeatedly appear in highly intelligent minds. These people conserve energy, reject wasted effort, and work in bursts. If you recognize 4 specific signs, you are not failing at life. You may be protecting a form of intelligence that was never taught how to awaken. In psychology, laziness is not a clinical diagnosis, not a personality disorder, and not a stable trait defined in any official manual. It is a social label, created when someone's behavior does not match external expectations of speed, productivity, or visible effort. Modern culture often equates movement with value, assuming that the person who looks busiest must also be the most effective. Psychology strongly disagrees with this assumption. Cognitive research shows that a large portion of human effort happens internally. Thinking, planning, evaluating risks, suppressing impulses, and simulating outcomes all require significant mental energy. These processes leave no visible trace, which makes them easy to overlook. Studies on cognitive load demonstrate that a person can appear inactive while their mental resources are already heavily taxed. This is why some people feel exhausted even after doing nothing. Their minds have been working continuously, but in ways that cannot be observed from the outside. When society fails to recognize invisible effort, it often replaces understanding with judgment. What gets labeled as laziness is frequently a mismatch between how intelligence operates internally and how productivity is measured externally. One of the most common signs mistaken for laziness is a strong resistance to tasks that feel inefficient, repetitive, or meaningless. Psychological studies on decision-making show that individuals with higher cognitive ability naturally perform cost-benefit analysis before acting. Their minds instinctively evaluate whether an action is worth the energy it demands. Because of this, intelligent individuals are often more sensitive to wasted effort. They disengage quickly from tasks that lack structure, purpose, or clear payoff. To observers who equate obedience with effort, this selective refusal appears as procrastination or laziness. In reality, it reflects mental efficiency rather than avoidance. This mindset does not come from a lack of discipline, but from an intolerance for inefficiency. The brain is not rejecting work itself. It is rejecting work that does not contribute to learning, progress, or meaningful outcomes. Over time, this selective engagement can be misunderstood as a character flaw, when it is actually a cognitive filter designed to preserve energy for problems that truly matter. Many people who are labeled as lazy spend long periods sitting still, staring into space, or appearing disengaged from their surroundings. From the outside, this looks like inactivity. Psychologically, it often indicates intense internal processing. For certain cognitive profiles, thinking is not preparation for action, it is the action. Neuroscientists studying resting brain states have found that when a person appears to be doing nothing, the brain often activates networks responsible for imagination, memory integration, future planning, and abstract reasoning. These same networks are strongly linked to creativity and problem solving. Mental simulation consumes energy, even though the body remains still. Because this work is invisible, it is easily dismissed. Silence is mistaken for emptiness, and stillness is confused with disengagement. In reality, some minds operate best when physical movement is reduced, allowing cognitive resources to focus inward. What you see is a quiet body. What you miss is a mind testing ideas, replaying outcomes, and refining understanding. To label this process as laziness is to misunderstand how certain forms of intelligence naturally function. Another behavior often misinterpreted as laziness is difficulty sustaining attention on repetitive or low-stimulation tasks. Psychologists who study boredom explain this not as a failure of discipline, but as a mismatch between cognitive capacity and task demands. Research shows that individuals with higher intelligence tend to master simple tasks quickly. Once the problem is understood, the brain no longer receives sufficient stimulation. This leads to disengagement, restlessness, and loss of motivation. The nervous system stops responding, not because effort is lacking, but because there is nothing left to solve. For these individuals, boredom is not comfort, it is mental friction. Tasks designed for repetition feel suffocating rather than easy. The mind seeks complexity, novelty, or challenge, and withdraws when none is present. The issue is not unwillingness to work. It is unwillingness to stay trapped in work that offers no cognitive return. Many people labeled as lazy do not work in a steady, linear rhythm. Instead, they alternate between periods of intense focus and long stretches of apparent inactivity. From the outside, this pattern looks inconsistent and unreliable. Psychologists who study creativity describe it as common among individuals who rely on insight rather than routine. High-level thinking often unfolds in stages: exploration, incubation, and execution. During incubation, the brain appears idle, but it is unconsciously organizing information and testing connections. When clarity arrives, effort becomes sudden and concentrated. This is why some people can produce remarkable results in short bursts after long, quiet periods. Productivity in these minds is non-linear. They do not gain value from constant motion, but from timing. Observers who expect visible effort at all times misinterpret this rhythm as laziness, when it is actually efficiency shaped by depth rather than endurance. Efficiency replaces stamina. Precision replaces repetition. What looks like inconsistency is often a mind waiting for the moment when action truly matters. Psychologists studying self-regulation explain that intelligent individuals are more likely to resist constant busyness because they detect diminishing returns earlier. They recognize when continued effort no longer produces meaningful progress. At that point, withdrawal becomes a rational choice rather than avoidance. Research on mental fatigue shows that forced continuous effort reduces accuracy, creativity, and emotional stability. Pushing beyond cognitive limits creates exhaustion without improvement. Some minds instinctively conserve energy, choosing strategic rest over performative productivity. In a culture that rewards visible struggle, this restraint is misunderstood. Doing less appears irresponsible. In reality, it is often an advanced form of control. Not all effort is equal, and not all restraint is laziness. It is essential to separate intelligent disengagement from emotional exhaustion. Psychologists in clinical settings describe a condition called anhedonia, where a person loses interest and motivation across nearly all activities, including those that once brought meaning or pleasure. This state is not selective, it is pervasive. Anhedonia does not depend on context, task value, or cognitive challenge. The individual feels empty regardless of opportunity. This differs sharply from selective withdrawal, where motivation returns when a task feels meaningful or stimulating. Intelligent disengagement is strategic. Emotional exhaustion is global. Confusing the two can be dangerous. When exhaustion is mistaken for laziness, people are pushed to optimize instead of heal. Their nervous system is overwhelmed, not inefficient. The correct response is not discipline, but recovery. Stillness can be wisdom, but it can also be a warning. Understanding the difference protects intelligence from being blamed for what is actually psychological strain. Sociologists studying modern work culture explain that productivity systems reward visibility more than substance. Those who appear constantly busy are assumed to be valuable, regardless of actual output. This creates a visibility bias that favors motion over meaning. Quiet energy selective intelligence suffers under this model. Deep thinking, selective effort, and internal processing are difficult to display. As a result, individuals who conserve energy and avoid unnecessary action are mislabeled as lazy or disengaged. This bias is reinforced by environments that celebrate speed, multitasking, and constant responsiveness. Silence becomes suspicious, stillness becomes failure, depth becomes invisible. In a noisy culture, quiet competence is easy to misjudge, and when intelligence is misunderstood, it is often punished rather than nurtured. Psychologists who study motivation warn that internalizing the label lazy can be deeply harmful, especially for individuals whose intelligence operates selectively rather than constantly. When people believe they are lazy, they begin forcing themselves into productivity styles that conflict with their natural cognitive rhythm. Over time, this creates friction between effort and identity. Research on motivation shows that shame-based pressure reduces intrinsic drive. Instead of working from curiosity or meaning, individuals act from fear of judgment. For intelligent minds, this is especially destructive. Their strength lies in depth, insight, and internal standards, not constant output. When these strengths are suppressed, creativity fades and self-trust erodes. Eventually, the person may become exhausted, not from work, but from pretending to work in ways that feel unnatural. Burnout follows, not because the person lacks discipline, but because they have been trying to operate against their cognitive design. Shame does not create discipline, it creates disconnection from one's own intelligence. Laziness is not always the absence of effort. Sometimes it is the refusal to waste it. What appears as inactivity may simply be an intelligent mind waiting for work worthy of its attention. If you recognize these 4 signs in yourself, you are not broken, unmotivated, or behind in life. You may be wired for efficiency, selectivity, and depth in a world that rewards speed and visibility. Your challenge is not to become busier, but to become aligned. Awakening this form of intelligence does not begin with forcing yourself to move faster. It begins with understanding how your mind truly works, respecting its limits, and choosing environments that value meaning over motion. When intelligence is allowed to operate naturally, what once looked like laziness often reveals itself as quiet mastery.